I stood at the altar, in my perfectly tailored tux heart, pounding with excitement as 200 guests filled the church pews. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Sarah and I had been together for 5 wonderful years, and I could not wait to make her my wife. My brother Michael stood beside me as my best man, a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Little did I know, he had orchestrated a plan that would shatter everything I held dear. When Sarah finally appeared, it was not to say I do, but to throw her engagement ring at me with tears streaming down her face. Before you hear about the darkest day of my life, where are you watching from? Hit subscribe if you want to know how I reclaimed my dignity and found happiness again despite this betrayal. Growing up with Michael was always a competition I never signed up for. He was 3 years older, and from the moment I could walk and talk, I was measuring up to his accomplishments and consistently falling short in our parents' eyes. Michael excelled at everything he touched. Straight as in school captain of 3 sports teams and voted most likely to succeed in his high school yearbook. I was different. My grades were average at best, and athletics never came naturally to me. But I had my strengths too. I could connect with people, make them laugh, make them feel at ease. These social skills eventually helped me build a successful marketing business while Michael pursued his law degree. Despite our differences, I idolized my brother growing up. I wanted his approval more than anyone else's, when he would occasionally let me tag along with his friends or help me with homework. Those were the highlights of my childhood. Our parents never tried to hide their favoritism. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" became the soundtrack of my youth, playing on repeat through my teenage years. Michael soaked up the attention, thriving in the spotlight, while I learned to find my place in the shadows. As adults, we maintained what I thought was a close relationship. We grabbed beers on weekends, called each other for advice, and spent holidays together. Looking back, I can see the signs I missed. How Michael's smile would tighten whenever I shared good news. How he would subtly undermine my accomplishments with backhanded compliments. But at the time, I was blind to it all. I thought we had overcome the childhood rivalry, that we had both grown up. I could not have been more wrong. My life changed 5 years ago when I attended a charity fundraiser for the local children's hospital. I was there representing my company as a sponsor, and Sarah was there as one of the pediatricians being honored for her work. The moment I saw her across the room, time seemed to slow down. She had this radiant smile that lit up the entire ballroom. And when she laughed at something, a colleague said the sound cut through the noise of the crowd and found its way straight to my heart. It took me 3 glasses of champagne to work up the courage to approach her. When I finally did, I nervously knocked over a tray of appetizers. Instead of being embarrassed, Sarah helped me clean up the mess, laughing about how we both had something to remember each other by. We talked for hours that night, long after the event had ended, sitting on a bench outside the venue under a starlit sky. I learned she had dedicated her life to helping children with chronic illnesses, that she loved old movies and hiking trails nobody else knew about. Our connection was immediate and powerful. After 3 weeks of dating, I knew she was the one. I told Michael about her during one of our weekend beers, and his reaction should have been my first warning. His jaw tightened for just a moment, before he plastered on a smile and said, "She sounds too good to be true. When do I get to meet this angel?" There was something in his tone that felt off, but I brushed it aside too, caught up in my newfound happiness. Sarah and Michael first met at my 31st birthday party. I was excited for the 2 most important people in my life to finally connect. They seemed to hit it off, with Michael turning on his trademark charm. Sarah later told me she thought my brother was nice enough, but something about him made her slightly uncomfortable. Again, I dismissed the warning sign, attributing her reservations to nerves about meeting my family. 3 years into our relationship, on a trip to the coast where we had our first vacation together, I proposed to Sarah at sunset. I had planned it for months. The private dinner on the beach, the violinist playing our song, the ring that took me 6 months to save for. When she said yes, crying and laughing simultaneously, I felt like the luckiest man alive. Michael was the first person I called with the news. There was a pause on the line before he congratulated me, a hesitation that lasted just a second too long. "That's great news, little brother," he said eventually. "I am happy for you. The wedding planning consumed the next year of our lives. Sarah threw herself into every detail from the flower arrangements to the seating charts. I was busy expanding my business, working long hours to ensure we would have the financial stability I wanted to provide for our future together. In retrospect, my absence created the perfect opportunity for Michael to insert himself into the preparations. He volunteered to help Sarah with vendor meetings I could not attend, offered to pick up samples when she was working late shifts at the hospital. I was grateful for his support, completely unaware that every moment they spent together was part of his scheme. 2 months before the wedding, Sarah mentioned that Michael had been acting strange during their last meeting with the caterer. "He kept bringing up stories about your ex-girlfriends," she said with a frown. It was kind of weird timing. I assured her that Michael sometimes had an odd sense of humor and promised to talk to him about it. When I confronted him, he laughed it off. "I was just trying to loosen her up, Johnny. She seemed so stressed about the wedding." His explanation seemed reasonable, and with everything else going on, I let it drop. As the wedding day approached, I was floating on cloud 9, imagining our future together, the house we would buy, the children we would have growing old side by side. The rehearsal dinner went perfectly, with touching speeches and laughter all around. Michael stood up last, raising his glass with what I now recognize was a calculated gleam in his eye. "To my little brother and his beautiful bride," he said, "may your marriage be filled with trust and honesty." If only I had known those words were the beginning of the end. The morning of my wedding day dawned bright and clear, as if the universe itself was celebrating with me. I woke up early, too excited to sleep, and stood by my apartment window watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Today was the day I would marry the love of my life. I felt invincible, blessed beyond measure, completely unaware that in just a few hours my world would collapse around me. My groomsmen arrived at 9 in the morning, bringing breakfast and nervous energy. We joked around as we got ready, straightening ties and sharing stories. Michael arrived last, looking sharp in his best man suit, a strange smile playing on his lips. "Today is going to be a day you will never forget, brother," he said, clapping me on the back. There was something in his voice that sent a chill down my spine, but I chalked it up to wedding day jitters. Just as we were about to leave for the church, Michael pulled me aside, saying he needed to talk to me privately. In the quiet of my bedroom, he placed both hands on my shoulders and looked me directly in the eyes. "Are you sure about this? Johnny, marriage is forever. Once you say those vows, there is no going back." His concern seemed genuine, brotherly even. I assured him I had never been more certain of anything in my life. He nodded slowly, then pulled me into a tight hug. "Whatever happens today," he whispered, "remember that everything I do is because I care about you." At the time, I thought he was being sentimental. Now I recognize it as the warning it was. We arrived at the church an hour before the ceremony. Everything was perfect. White roses and lilies adorning every pew, sunlight streaming through stained glass windows, the string quartet playing softly in the background. Our 200 guests began filing in, filling the space with excited chatter. I stood at the front with Michael and my other groomsmen, my heart racing with anticipation. As the minutes ticked by and the ceremony start time came and went, an uneasy murmur spread through the congregation. Sarah was late, which was completely out of character for her. 15 minutes passed, then 20, then 30. I checked my phone repeatedly, finding no messages. Michael stepped away several times, claiming he was trying to call the bridal party to find out what was happening. Each time he returned, he shook his head solemnly, offering no explanation for the delay. Finally, just as the pastor suggested we might need to postpone, the church doors burst open. There stood Sarah, still in her wedding dress, but her face was a mask of fury and pain, mascara streaming down her cheeks. My heart stopped as she stormed down the aisle, not with the measured steps of a bride, but with the purposeful stride of someone about to deliver judgment. The music faltered and died, leaving a horrified silence in its wake. "How could you?" she screamed, her voice echoing through the church as she reached the altar. "Our wedding day, Jonathan. You could not even wait until after our wedding day." I stood frozen, completely bewildered by her accusations. Before I could formulate a response, she thrust her phone in my face. On the screen were text messages, supposedly from me to a woman named Megan, arranging a meetup the night before our wedding. Messages I had never sent to a woman I had never met. Sarah, I never sent these. I do not know who this person is. I pleaded desperately, trying to make sense of what was happening, but she was beyond listening. Next came the photos. Clearly manipulated images, showing me with another woman in compromising positions. As I stared at them in horror, I noticed inconsistencies. The lighting was wrong, the proportions slightly off, telltale signs of digital manipulation that were invisible to someone blinded by hurt and betrayal. Your brother showed me everything, Sarah said, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow hurt more than her screams. He found them on your phone this morning while you were in the shower. He did not want to show me, but he said I deserved to know the truth before I made the biggest mistake of my life. She pulled the engagement ring from her finger and threw it at me. It bounced off my chest and clattered to the floor, the sound deafening in the shocked silence of the church. I turned to Michael, the pieces finally clicking into place. The strange behavior, the odd comments, the unexplained absences. His expression was a masterful performance of sorrow and sympathy, but I caught a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. You did this, I said, my voice breaking with the weight of his betrayal. Why would you do this to me? To us, Michael instantly shifted into the role of protective brother, placing himself between me and Sarah as if shielding her. I know this is painful, Johnny, but do not make it worse by lying. I found the evidence and did what any decent person would do. Sarah deserved to know. He turned to the stunned wedding guests. I apologize, everyone, but clearly the wedding is off. Please give the family some privacy during this difficult time. The most devastating part was watching as everyone, including our parents, gravitated toward Michael's version of events. They surrounded Sarah, offering comfort and shooting disgusted glances in my direction. No one came to stand beside me. No one asked for my side of the story. In their eyes, the evidence was irrefutable, and Michael, always the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, had no reason to lie. As the church emptied, I stood alone at the altar, surrounded by flowers that suddenly seemed garish beneath lights that were too bright. My father approached, disappointment etched in every line of his face. I never thought you would do something like this, he said quietly. Your mother and I raised you better. When I tried to explain, to defend myself, he held up his hand. Michael showed us everything. The evidence speaks for itself. Then he too walked away, leaving me completely alone. Outside the church, I watched through the open doors as Michael comforted my would-be bride, his arm around her shoulders as he guided her to his car. Over his shoulder, he looked back at me with an expression I will never forget, a small, triumphant smile that confirmed everything. In that moment, I understood that my own brother had methodically destroyed the most important day of my life out of sheer jealousy, and there was absolutely nothing I could do to prove it. The days following what should have been my wedding passed in a blur of shock and disbelief. I tried calling Sarah countless times, but she had blocked my number. I sent emails that went unanswered, wrote letters that were returned unopened. My desperate attempts to explain that I had been framed were met with silence or outright hostility. Sarah's father even called to threaten a restraining order if I did not stop trying to contact her. My parents sided with Michael without hesitation. We raised you to be honest, Jonathan, my mother said during a painful phone call. If you had made a mistake, you should have owned up to it instead of going through with the wedding. No matter how vehemently I protested my innocence, they chose to believe the evidence Michael had manufactured. The perfect son could not possibly have lied, while I, always the disappointment, was certainly capable of such betrayal. Our mutual friends divided into camps, with the vast majority standing by Sarah. After all, they had seen the messages and photos with their own eyes. Michael had been thorough in spreading his fabricated evidence, showing the material to key people who would disseminate it further. Within a week, I had lost not only my fiancée, but most of my social circle as well. The isolation was crushing, a secondary pain layered on top of the primary wound of Sarah's loss. The only person who stood by me was my younger sister, Amy. At 25, she had always been perceptive about Michael's true nature, having experienced his manipulations firsthand growing up. "Something is not right about this whole situation," she told me over coffee 2 weeks after the wedding disaster. "Michael has always been jealous of your relationships. Remember how he tried to sabotage things with Jessica in high school?" I had forgotten that incident. How Michael had spread rumors about my first serious girlfriend, leading to our breakup. The pattern had been established long ago, but I had been too trusting to see it. I could not stay in town, surrounded by whispers and accusatory glances. Every coffee shop, restaurant, and street corner held memories of Sarah and the life we had planned together. A month after the non-wedding, I accepted a job offer in Denver, 2,000 miles away from the ruins of my old life. I sold my condo, packed what I could into my car, and left without saying goodbye to anyone except Amy. Michael tried to call as I was leaving town, but I let it go to voicemail. His message was a masterpiece of fake concern. "Running away will not fix this, Johnny. You need to face what you have done." I deleted it and blocked his number. The next 3 years were an exercise in rebuilding from absolute zero. Denver became my sanctuary, a place where nobody knew my story or judged me for crimes I had not committed. I threw myself into work, channeling all my pain and anger into building my marketing consultancy. Professional success became my only goal, the one area of my life where I could still find validation and purpose. 16-hour workdays were common. I would return to my sparse apartment, only to shower and catch a few hours of sleep before starting again. During those first months, I battled depression so severe that there were days I could barely get out of bed. The injustice of it all was suffocating. Not only had I lost the woman I loved, but I had been painted as the villain in a story scripted entirely by my brother. There were dark moments when I questioned whether life was worth continuing, but somehow I always found the strength to push through to the next day. Perhaps it was stubborn determination not to let Michael win completely, or maybe it was the faint hope that someday, somehow, the truth would come to light. Amy remained my lifeline to sanity. We spoke weekly, careful conversations where she avoided mentioning Sarah or Michael unless I brought them up first. She visited twice a year, bringing news from home that I pretended not to care about but secretly absorbed like a man dying of thirst. Through her, I learned that Sarah had thrown herself into her medical career, working longer hours and taking on more responsibilities at the hospital. Michael had been promoted at his law firm and was dating someone new every few months, never settling into a serious relationship. The hardest news came 18 months after I left, when Amy reluctantly told me that Sarah and Michael had been spotted having dinner together. "It might have been nothing," she said, quickly seeing my expression. "Maybe they just ran into each other." But we both knew better. Michael had orchestrated the destruction of my relationship with the woman I loved, not just out of jealousy, but because he wanted her for himself. It was the final twist of the knife, and it nearly broke me all over again. Dating was out of the question during those years. Several women expressed interest, but I could not bring myself to trust anyone enough to open up. My heart remained locked away, safely guarded behind walls of work and routine. I made a few casual friends in Denver, people from the gym, business associates, neighbors, but kept everyone at arm's length. The risk of being hurt again felt too great to bear. Almost exactly 3 years after I left town on a rainy Tuesday evening, as I was preparing dinner in my apartment, my phone rang with Amy's ringtone. I answered casually, expecting our usual weekly catch-up. Instead, her voice came through urgent and breathless. "Johnny, you need to sit down for this," she said, without preamble. "I know what Michael did. I have proof." My hands shook so badly, I had to put down the knife I was holding. "What are you talking about?" I asked, though a part of me already knew. Hope and dread mingled in my chest as Amy explained that she had attended a law firm party with her boyfriend the previous weekend. Michael had been there, drinking heavily as the night wore on. Amy overheard him in a corner, with a colleague laughing about the greatest Photoshop job ever and how he had dodged a bullet when Sarah almost married his brother. Suspicious Amy had followed Michael when he stepped outside to take a phone call. Hiding behind a pillar on the terrace, she recorded him bragging to another friend about how he had created fake text messages and doctored photos to make it look like I had cheated on Sarah. He actually said he had been in love with Sarah since the first time he met her. Amy told me, her voice tight with anger. "He knew she would never leave you, unless she thought you had betrayed her in the worst possible way, so he created the perfect evidence. Amy had not confronted Michael that night, knowing it was more important to secure the evidence first. The next day, she went to his apartment while he was at work, using the spare key he had given her for emergencies. There, on his laptop, she found a folder containing all the original images. He had manipulated the template he had used to create fake text messages and even a journal, where he had outlined his plan in meticulous detail. She copied everything onto a flash drive before carefully putting everything back exactly as she had found it. "I have it all, Johnny," she said, her voice breaking. "Every piece of evidence proving he set you up. He destroyed your life out of jealousy, and I am not letting him get away with it anymore." I sat in stunned silence, 3 years of pain and injustice crashing over me in waves. The vindication I had desperately wanted was finally within reach, but I found myself hesitating. Did I really want to reopen those wounds? Had I not finally started to build a new life? Sarah needs to know the truth. Amy continued, seeming to read my thoughts. "And Mom and Dad and everyone else who believed his lies. You deserve to have your name cleared, Johnny. You deserve justice." Her words penetrated the protective numbness I had cultivated over the years. She was right. This was not just about Sarah anymore, or even about Michael. It was about reclaiming my story, my truth, my dignity. "When can you come to Denver?" I asked, making a decision that would change everything once again. It was time to face the past I had been running from for 3 long years. Amy arrived in Denver 3 days later with a small suitcase and a laptop bag containing all the evidence against Michael. We spent the entire weekend going through everything: the original photos he had manipulated, the fake text message templates, and most damning of all, his journal entries, detailing his plan and his feelings for Sarah. Reading his words made me physically ill. Sarah deserves better than Johnny, he had written. Once she sees what kind of man he really is, she will understand that I have always been the better choice. After reviewing everything, Amy and I formulated a plan. Simply sending the evidence electronically felt too impersonal for something this important. The truth needed to be revealed face to face with all the key players present. My parents were hosting their annual summer barbecue the following weekend, an event that typically brought together family, close friends, and neighbors. Michael would certainly be there, and through careful questioning, Amy had confirmed that Sarah had been invited as well. It would be the perfect opportunity for a confrontation. I took a week off work, packed a single suitcase, and flew back to the town I had fled 3 years earlier. Returning felt surreal, like stepping into a familiar nightmare. The streets, shops, and parks were unchanged, but I viewed them through the lens of everything that had happened. Amy picked me up from the airport, her expression a mixture of determination and concern. "Are you sure you are ready for this?" she asked, as we drove toward her apartment where I would be staying. I nodded silently. Ready or not, it was time for the truth. The day of the barbecue dawned bright and clear, much like my wedding day had 3 years before. Amy and I arrived deliberately late, wanting to ensure everyone else would already be present. The familiar sound of laughter and conversation drifted from the backyard as we approached the house I had grown up in. Amy squeezed my hand reassuringly before opening the gate. The chatter died immediately as people noticed me. My mother dropped the plate she was holding, the crash of breaking ceramic unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. My father stood frozen by the grill spatula suspended in midair. And there, across the yard, Michael was locked in what appeared to be a deep conversation with Sarah. They both turned at the commotion, and I watched as Michael's face drained of color. Sarah looked like she had seen a ghost, her hand rising to her throat in a gesture of shock. Jonathan, my mother, finally managed taking a hesitant step toward me. "We had no idea you were coming." Before she could reach me, Michael was striding across the lawn, his expression morphing from surprise to controlled concern. "Johnny," he said loudly, "this is unexpected. Maybe we should talk privately before you join the party." The warning in his eyes was clear. "Leave now, or I will make this worse for you." But I was no longer the broken man who had fled town with his tail between his legs. "Actually, Michael," I replied, my voice steady. Despite the adrenaline coursing through me, I think what I have to say should be heard by everyone here, especially Sarah. At the mention of her name, Sarah took a small step forward, uncertainty written across her features. She looked different. Her hair was shorter, and there was a guardedness in her eyes that had not been there before. The sight of her still made my heart ache, but it was a duller pain, now tempered by time and distance. Amy moved to stand beside me, opening her laptop. "Before anyone says anything else, there is something you all need to see." She turned the screen toward the gathered crowd and pressed play on the first video. Michael drunk at the law firm party, boasting about how he had sabotaged my wedding. His own words condemned him, slurring but clear. "Greatest con I ever pulled." Those fake texts looked so real, even I almost believed them. The gathered guests gasped collectively, heads turning to stare at Michael, whose face had gone from pale to ashen. "That is taken out of context," he sputtered, looking around desperately for allies. "I was drunk joking around. Johnny has clearly manipulated that footage." But Amy was already pulling up the next piece of evidence. Photographs of his journal entries detailing his plan in his own handwriting, dated weeks before the wedding. "You always were jealous of anything good in my life," I said quietly, as the evidence continued to mount on the screen. "But I never thought you would go this far, destroying my relationship with Sarah because you wanted her for yourself. Did you really think she would turn to you? After what you did?" Michael lunged toward the laptop, but two of my cousins stepped forward to block his path. The facade was cracking now, his carefully constructed mask of the concerned brother slipping away to reveal the jealous, calculating man beneath. "You never deserved her," he shouted, abandoning all pretense. "I loved her from the moment I met her, but she was too blinded by you to see it." His outburst confirmed everything beyond doubt. The gathered crowd murmured in shock, many of them the same people who had attended my doomed wedding and believed the worst of me. My mother was crying softly, my father's face a storm of confusion and dawning anger. But I was focused only on Sarah, who stood completely still amid the chaos, tears streaming down her face. I approached her slowly, stopping at a respectful distance. "I never cheated on you, Sarah. I would never have hurt you that way. Every day for 3 years, I have lived with everyone believing I was capable of betraying the woman I loved more than anything. I did not come back to ask for forgiveness or to try to rekindle what we had. I came back because you deserve to know the truth." Sarah looked from me to Michael and back again, her medical training perhaps helping her maintain composure while processing this shocking revelation. 3 years, she whispered finally. 3 years of believing you were someone completely different from the man I thought I knew. She turned to Michael with such disgust that he physically recoiled. "And you comforted me. You let me cry on your shoulder. You asked me out 6 months later, claiming you had always cared about me. It was all a lie. The aftermath was chaotic. Michael attempted to leave, only to be stopped by my father, who demanded he stay and face what he had done. My mother alternated between apologizing to me and berating Michael for his deception. Old friends approached awkwardly, offering hesitant apologies for believing the worst without questioning. Through it all, I remained calm, experiencing a strange sense of detachment, as if watching the scene unfold from a distance. The consequences for Michael were swift and severe. My parents, once his most steadfast supporters, could not reconcile themselves with his betrayal. They asked him to move out of the family home where he had been staying temporarily between apartments. His law firm placed him on leave when news of his unethical behavior spread, eventually resulting in his dismissal. Former friends distanced themselves, unwilling to associate with someone capable of such calculated cruelty. Sarah and I spoke privately that evening, sitting on the porch swing where we had spent countless hours during our relationship. The familiarity of it was painful, like pressing on a bruise that had never fully healed. "I should have trusted you," she said, her voice thick with regret. "I should have at least given you the chance to explain." He made sure the evidence was convincing. I replied, neither accepting nor rejecting her implicit apology. "He knew exactly what would hurt you the most, what would make you unable to even look at me." We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of all we had lost hanging in the air between us. "Can we try again?" she finally asked, reaching for my hand. "Now that we know the truth, maybe we could rebuild what we had." Her question was not entirely unexpected, but my answer surprised even me. "No," I said gently, moving my hand away. "Too much has happened, Sarah. 3 years of believing I was capable of that kind of betrayal, 3 years of me living with that undeserved reputation. We cannot go back to who we were before. The relief that washed over me as I spoke these words confirmed I had made the right decision. Some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt, and perhaps should not be. I stayed in town for 2 more weeks, reconnecting with my parents and allowing them to begin making amends for their lack of faith in me. I had lunch with old friends who had reached out after learning the truth. Though these interactions were more polite than warm, the damage done to those relationships might never be fully repaired. Throughout my stay, Sarah called several times, each conversation a little more strained than the last, as she came to accept that our story had reached its true end. The most difficult encounter was with Michael, who showed up at Amy's apartment unannounced one evening. He looked terrible. Unshaven eyes, bloodshot clothes, rumpled. "I came to apologize," he said when I opened the door, though he could not meet my gaze. What I did was unforgivable. Yes, I agreed simply. It was. I did not invite him in, but I did not close the door either. "I was always so jealous of you," he continued, words tumbling out as if he had rehearsed them. "Everyone thought I was the successful one, but you were always happier, always more content. You found Sarah, and she loved you in a way no one has ever loved me. I convinced myself I was saving her from making a mistake, but the truth is I could not stand to see you have something I wanted so badly." I listened without interrupting, neither accepting nor rejecting his explanation. When he finished, I simply said, "I hope you get help, Michael. Not for my sake, but for your own." Then I closed the door, not in anger, but with a finality that we both understood. Perhaps someday forgiveness would be possible, but that day was still far in the future. I returned to Denver with a lighter heart, the vindication having washed away years of accumulated bitterness. I threw myself back into work, but with a healthier balance this time. I joined a hiking club, made real friends instead of mere acquaintances, and even adopted a dog from the local shelter, a mixed breed named Cooper, who quickly became my most loyal companion. 6 months after the truth came to light, I met Jessica at a charity fundraiser similar to the one where I had first met Sarah, a symmetry that felt significant. Jessica was a landscape architect with a quick wit and a genuine laugh that drew me in immediately. We started slowly, both carrying baggage from previous relationships, but there was an honesty between us from the beginning that felt solid and real. When I eventually told her my story, she listened without judgment, her hand steady in mine. "Thank you for trusting me with that," she said simply when I finished. No platitudes, no excessive sympathy, just acknowledgement of the trust it had taken to share something so painful. In that moment, I knew I was finally ready to love again. The journey to healing was neither quick nor straightforward. There were still days when the injustice of what had happened threatened to overwhelm me, when trust felt like too great a risk to take. But gradually those days became less frequent. I learned that while betrayal can break your heart, it need not break your capacity for happiness. The truth, even when it comes years too late, has a power all its own. It may not restore what was lost, but it can clear the path for something new to grow in its place. Has someone you trusted ever betrayed you in a way that changed the course of your life? How did you find the strength to rebuild? Share your story in the comments below. If this journey of betrayal and redemption resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of overcoming life's greatest challenges. Remember that sometimes the strongest people are not those who never fall, but those who rise again with greater wisdom and compassion. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to seek your own truth, whatever it may be.